We begin at 5 with a difficult to hear and hard to believe story. The suspect in a deadly shooting near a North Portland park is now tied to several other shootings, 2 of which were also deadly. Thank you for joining us. I'm Laurel Porter.
And I'm David Mulco, and our first few stories this evening will likely be troubling to many of you watching, beginning with that violence that dates back to earlier this year. So our Mike Benner's been digging into the suspect, Joseph Banks, in these cases at length. And Mike, you've made a disturbing discovery there.
Yeah, that's right, David. It appears Joseph Banks did not know his victims. The first was Isaiah Hurst back in early January. But we've learned Banks is accused of shooting more than a half dozen people between early January and early March, all random.
A rain-soaked note and a wilted flower at the corner of Southeast 119th and Stark. This is what's left of a tribute to Jeff Ramirez, who was shot and killed here back in early February. Ramirez's family telling us this at the time.
He was an amazing, loving person. We still are in disbelief. It's like a weird nightmare. We found out the day of that evening.
Ramirez's family had no idea who killed their loved one, but now they do. Authorities have identified the shooter as Joseph Banks. He was in court Tuesday morning.
912, Alpha Banks.
If his name rings a bell, it's because we reported on him earlier this month after he allegedly shot and killed Mark Johnson near North Portland's Dawson Park. The shooting deaths of both Johnson and Ramirez appear to be random, according to the Oregonian, as do a handful of other shootings that Banks is allegedly connected to. One of those is the shooting death of Isaiah Hurst back in early January. Hurst's family said this just days after his murder.
We are literally suffering and dealing with this every single day. We know that Zig is never gonna come back, and we don't know why.
What we do know is that the suspected killer Banks is no stranger to law enforcement. His criminal history includes a dozen felony convictions. Banks, who reportedly suffers from schizophrenia, has spent most of the last decade in federal custody. Today, he finds himself back in the custody of law enforcement, this time pleading not guilty to the shooting deaths of 3 people, including Jeff Ramirez.
He was just a wonderful person. I mean, everybody that knew him. He is going to be completely missed.
All right, Joseph Banks is facing 15 charges, the most serious being murder and attempted murder. A judge has ruled that Banks be held behind bars without bail. He is due back in court on May 5th. Laurel.
Thank you, Mike. And the victim of a shooting in Northeast Portland earlier this month has died. It happened on March 16th on Northeast Cesar Chavez Boulevard near Halsey. 30-year-old Zachary Harris was shot. Police say medics were able to keep him alive for a while, but he ultimately died from his injuries. Anyone with information about the shooting should contact Portland Police.
From an unsolved homicide to another from last year where police now say they have made an arrest. You might remember the Friday night shooting last September. It was into a pizza bar at the corner of Northwest Gleason and 21st. Investigators allege that 25-year-old Marshawn Edwards fired into Silver Dollar Pizza, wounding 2 and killing 34-year-old Jacob Vasquez. Now police say Vasquez was not the suspect's intended target. They say they believe Edwards did know one of the other victims.
She was always there to make sure everybody was happy. Everybody was laughing. Everybody was having fun.
And tonight, friends and family are mourning in Salem as a memorial grows at that site where an alleged drunk driver killed 4 people and injured 2 others. Now, according to survivors, the car plowed right through the homeless camp in the early hours of Sunday morning. Police now identifying the driver as 24-year-old Enrique Rodriguez. Our Christine Pidewanich joins us again on this story tonight. Christine, yesterday the suspect was in court. Today you spoke with friends of a young woman who lost her life. What did they tell you?
I did, David. They said so many positive things about Rochelle Zamacona. In fact, it's clear that there are people who deeply love and care about the people who were killed in that crash. In fact, all you have to do is take a closer look at the encampment here in Northeast Salem to see a visual representation of that. Here at the corner of Northeast Division and Front Streets in Salem, flowers sit at the site of so much pain and sadness. People grieving the loss of 4 lives. One of them, 29-year-old Rochelle Zamacona. These photos are from her high school days.
She was just our little spitfire in the group. She always had a smile on her face.
if you wanted to have fun, if you needed somebody to lift your spirits, I feel like we always knew that we could count on Rochelle to do that.
Talia Davis and Sarah Hartness say they were all part of Zamakona's tight-knit circle of friends at Sweet Home High School. They say Zamakona was well-loved, athletic, and loved to ride horses.
And I feel like Rochelle had a really, really big group of people that cared about her.
She just was one of those people you couldn't help but laugh and smile around her.
But her friends say senior year, Zamakona began struggling with mental health.
There was a shift in her life choices, and we just kind of slowly were losing her from that point.
They say she also struggled with addiction and tried to get help.
We all still loved her so much and had high hopes for her, but I do feel like, the system failed her. And it's heartbreaking because she is and she was a wonderful person.
Over the last few years, they say they've fallen out of touch, and now many of them feel guilt.
We wish we could have done more for her. And I don't think anybody realized the circumstances were like where she was at. And it's heartbreaking.
Still, despite the painful situation, her friends who knew her best growing up are choosing to hold tight to their memories of her, choosing to remember her for the person she was, not for the struggles she endured.
I think there's always hope for someone to recover, and I'm really sad she didn't get that chance.
Other friends reached out to us saying the same things about Zamakona, that she was a joy, so fun to be around. And friends also say they hope there's a better system to help people struggling with mental health and addiction. And by the way, I just heard from people who live in this area that there will be a memorial on Saturday around 11 a.m. to try to remember the people who lost their lives. Christine Pitawanich, KGW News.
Well, we certainly do remember them and send our hearts and prayers out to their families. Thank you, Christine. Today, the MLS released its report surrounding the Portland Timbers and how the organization handled domestic violence allegations against a former player. The club is now being fined. Art Edwards joins us in the newsroom with the details. Art?
Well, Major League Soccer fined the Portland Timbers $25,000, Laurel, for not reporting an alleged domestic violence incident last year involving former player Andy Polo. The league's independent investigation into the incident found that the Timbers did not try to cover up the May 23rd incident or influence the decision of Polo's estranged wife about pursuing criminal charges. But this afternoon, the Timbers said in a statement that they acknowledge and accept the independent review's findings. The club terminated Polo's contract in February after additional allegations were made by his estranged wife. Now, Polo has denied all of the accusations. Peruvian club Universitario signed Polo. The contract, though, is conditional on Polo's ability to solve what they call his personal problems.
Thank you, Art. In Eugene now, police are looking for the person behind a horrific attack. They say someone splashed acid on a woman who was out walking her dog yesterday. She was treated at the hospital. Her dog was taken to an emergency veterinarian to check for burns. Police are investigating this as a possible bias crime because the assault could be related to the woman's ethnicity. They say the suspect is a young white man, somewhere in the range of 17 to 20 years old.
Well, to an update now on a story we've been following. Oregon prisoners who were released early. It was controversial at the time, and now we have new details on what happened next.
Governor Kate Brown commuted the sentences of hundreds of people during the pandemic. Galen Etlin joins us to break down a new report that shows how many of them reoffended. Galen?
Yes, Laurel, David, the report tracks a group of former prisoners released during an unusual time, and experts say the reoffender rates are slightly lower than the year before.
At the height of the pandemic, Governor Kate Brown commuted the sentences of hundreds of inmates, many considered medically vulnerable, allowing them early release.
And there were some fears about what it would look like when you had folks who were exiting the institution.
Dr. Ken Sanchagrin is executive director of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission, a nonpartisan state agency that tracks rates of recidivism, people convicted of crimes who reoffend. In a new preliminary report, it followed the first 266 people released on commuted sentences in 2020.
The vast majority of these releasees were medically vulnerable.
The report showed 18%, or 48 people, were arrested again, mostly for smaller crimes. 10 out of those 48 arrests were for more serious crimes against other people. 8% were convicted of new crimes, and 2% went back to prison.
What factors played into the success of them getting out and not reoffending.
These folks were vetted to make sure that they had appropriate housing, that they had their medical needs that they were going to be met once they released. They were vetted to ensure that they, or to the best case possible, that they didn't pose a public safety risk.
Hearing about inmates being released for whatever reason probably doesn't sit well with some people. Maybe what would your message be, having looked at the factors underneath all of this?
Especially in an era where we have seen some upticks in crime rates, especially in some of our major cities in the state, is that it's very unlikely that the commutations contributed to those types of dynamics that we're seeing outside right now.
The agency is working on future reports to track progress for other releasees, data that will be used to assess Oregon's criminal justice system.
It's a very expensive system to maintain. It's also a very important one for folks who are victims of crime, very consequential for individuals who are involved in it, right? We know that there are lots of racial disparities and other types of disparities over the years. Wherever we can lend to greater legitimacy within the system, greater efficiency within the system, that's the goal that we have.
Now, Governor Kate Brown faced some criticism and even a lawsuit over the pandemic commutations. We've got links to that background and the full report on KGW.com.